Welcome everybody. It's great to be back here. It's great to be back here in the host seat, I suppose. How are you both?
Very good.
So for those of you that are watching maybe for the first time, this is Sharon, and then we've got a special guest today, which is Matt Peart. So a round of applause for Matt.
Woo! Thank you.
It's good to see you both. What's news?
Good to see you out of isolation.
It's good to be out for a little bit.
Tell you what, it is so good being out of isolation. It is so good. I escaped, so
And you're in lockdown, weren't you?
I was in
Jono?
lockdown. So, but I'm here now, so it's good. Actually, Matt, being a basketball fan, I'm going to take us off on a tangent already. Have you been watching The Last Dance?
I have been. It's certainly been very enjoyable, and I can't wait to watch the next episode tonight.
I can't wait to watch it. I cannot wait to
love
watch it. I assume you've got no idea what we're talking about though, Shaz, do you?
Yeah, no, because we've been watching the Peaky Blinders.
You've what? You've been watching Peaky Blinders?
My future son-in-law put me on to them.
I can't believe that. Could you give us your best Peaky Blinders impersonation?
No, because I'm going to laugh too much.
Well, speaking of great segues, we're going to go from that into our conversation we're talking about for today. So just because we're the segue kings. So the conversation that we wanted to talk about today was one about worth, because I do think the world's talking a lot about self-worth at the moment. And like the way that I've been hearing this conversation has been around people have lost their jobs, and so they're no longer doing what they normally do, and they're kind of at home, they're irritable, they're frustrated, they're grumpy because they don't know who they are anymore. They a lot of people haven't expressed that directly, but I think that's what's going on. What do you think, Shaz?
I think there's a lot of things going on as to why they're irritable. I mean, you know who you are, but you were just irritable last week. Yeah, I think that there's always this question going on, who am I, what am I worth? And I suppose for us here at Taurus, those that lost their job or who were stood down because of the coronavirus, you would have to ask, what is my worth? You know, who am I? Am I of value? How can I be discarded just like that? It's really, really hard.
People are asking that all the time. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, you start to, there's only so long you can spend in one box before you start questioning everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you've got the same four walls up the whole time, you're going to be driven to insanity.
Yeah, especially if you're in a bright orange one like Lockie had the room I painted in.
I can imagine. I think people are also sort of talking about this a lot at the moment because there's this whole thing about Centrelink as well. And so, I know comments often made in a derogatory term towards the people that go onto Centrelink. It's almost been this pride thing of not having to be on it. But now all of a sudden some of those same people that used to say, if you get what you deserve, if you're on a Centrelink, you should be given, it should be meal tickets and receipts so that the world knows what you're spending it on because you don't deserve to spend it how you think you should do. I think that some of those same people who are now on Centrelink are finding that really troublesome to reconcile.
For some people, it's the first time they've ever been on Centrelink. So can you imagine lining up to get a Centrelink payment and you've never done it before?
Yeah.
It would be quite difficult. Yeah, I know that I had one staff member who had been on Centrelink and then had been working here, had worked so hard and was really, really proud of their hours and the fact that they had a paycheck and that they were able to do their own budget and organise their own life, and then we had to stand them down. And for them it was a big issue because all of a sudden they felt like they were back on the dole. And that was a huge, I'm just a dole worker now kind of thing, and it was a huge identity thing. But that's not who they were. Yeah.
So from this, I'm hearing that a lot of people get their sense of being from what they do as opposed to rather coming from a place of security in who they are. And so, Matt, we've invited you today to share a little bit of your story because I know that you've got there are parts of your story which brings you especially true to that message. Do you want to start to unpack a little bit about how this feels for you? Yeah,
definitely. It's sort of like society often tells us, to be successful, you get good grades in school, you go to uni, you get a job, you get married, you buy a house, so on and so forth.
Yeah. And you've done it all.
That's your life story. It's your biography.
I sort of fit that mould.
Especially the good grades bit.
No, I reckon especially the good wife bit.
Yes.
I mean, look, how pretty is she?
She's amazing. But yeah, I went through that and I went through uni, I achieved good grades in uni, and then I went on to started a career. Went to the next phase trying to find, the relationship, which, it ended up not working out all that well. And that led to me going into a spiral of depression for a few years.
Wow.
And the thing that I think was the reason was because I'd put my identity in my career and in that relationship. So when that relationship disappeared, my identity of who I was in the career was not enough to sustain the, and ward off the questions of, what's it all really about?
Yeah.
So, and coming out of that, I sort of, spent more time reading the Bible and actually learning about what God says you are. And, in Psalms, he says that you created the innermost being, knitted you together in your mother's womb. So he's known you from the very, very start. And
it's great.
in Matthew, he says he knows the number of hairs on your head.
Yeah.
So he knows more about us than anyone else.
Yeah.
So was it scary going on that journey? Like, was it sort of scary kind of having, I suppose, your world fall apart? You grow up thinking that this is the road to success, the road to identity. You've just got to tick the boxes.
The road to worth.
And, you were doing that quite successfully. Was it scary when it all fell apart?
It was. It was really quite scary. It was a moment of it was a moment of being plunged into total unknown.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you went through, I've had a very supportive family my whole life. So whenever I have faced troubles, I've always had that support network behind it. But this was one that they couldn't help me with. And, you're plunged into this darkness essentially alone.
Yeah.
And you can only really get out of it alone. But you're not really alone because you've got Jesus there with you. But yeah, for sure.
You go.
No, I was just going to say, was it hard finding the right questions to ask or even the right, because sometimes it can feel dark, but you don't know what it's all about. So it just feels confusing and you kind of feel a bit numb. So did it take a while to be able to ask those questions?
Certainly. It would have taken at least 18 months to even realise that the question was not actually about the relationship that broke down, but it was more about who you are and your worth to people. And it really took me 18 months to even understand that the reason I am in this hole was not because of a breakdown in a relationship, but because of having put my self-worth in, earthly things, so to say.
Yeah.
That's good. My question was going to be, I think when people reach that point, they have two different energies depending on their personality type. Like some people go chasing things to be able to fill that void to give them that sense of worth and value again, and other people sort of withdraw a little bit. Like, do either of those feel like they were part of your story?
Yeah, I was certainly a withdrawer.
Yeah.
I withdrew from friends and family and spent a lot of time alone.
Yeah.
Which wasn't necessarily helpful in any way. Yeah. But it was part of my process.
Yeah.
And spending that time alone. Eventually, you got to find the balance between going too far off the cliff versus actually being able to stay alone and work through things, being a bit of an inward process, or it takes me a bit of time to, even decide what I want for dinner, let alone work through some of life's bigger questions.
So what were some of the things that kept you, I suppose, alive? Because, depression can sometimes have a really nasty outcome, can't it? What were some of the things that helped along the way?
Well, my mates helped the most.
Yeah.
They sort of didn't let me. They didn't let me stay in my hobbit hole for too long. Yeah. But I also found a love for photography in that time, and so being able to get out and create some images of nature, particularly, really helped me start to see the world as more than just, what's going on inside of me. It helped me look outward again instead of inwards.
Yeah. It's amazing. I heard a quote yesterday about how nature is so powerful in the way, and it can restore our soul because it has a way. God has a way of speaking to us in nature. And then they were talking about the difference between Protestant and Catholicism and Protestantism is this kind of idea that God shows up sporadically, especially if you tick the right boxes, he'll show up. Whereas in Catholicism, there's kind of this concept of God being present everywhere all the time and just being able to tap into that. And a lot of creatives find that liturgical or that Catholic strain sometimes easier than, say, the Protestant strain, because it sort of encourages you to worship in nature or to embrace some of those other rituals which speak deep into our soul that don't necessarily require a lot of words. And so I think it's often healthier to hear that nature was so powerful for you in that space, because it does remind us that God is everywhere all the time, and there's truth that we can embrace from other streams.
Yeah, that's great. That's powerful. I just keep thinking of maybe our viewer at home who's sitting there and this is just resonating with them because they maybe lost their job, or just with the change in the world, they've lost that thing which used to feed them that identity and that worth. And I just wonder about how much that's resonating with them to be able to
just go out into nature and to let nature speak, especially in this season. I mean, we're in autumn, for goodness sake.
It's beautiful.
Such a beautiful season.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had to be holed up, I mean, autumn's a great season to be holed up in, isn't it? Like to look out the window and see all the beauty. But to be just reminded that God is everywhere all the time, and that he just doesn't show up when we pray the right prayer, or we read our Bible often enough, or we attend X number of church services, or we raise our hands, or, we pay the right amount of money, but that God is everywhere all the time, available and speaking to us and ministering to us. It's powerful.
Yeah, you're not wrong. So coming back to a comment you said about your mates and how they were one of the most important parts in you rediscovering your worth and keeping you in a healthy enough space to be able to get through that hard time. Like, I know for me, when I see my mates going through a hard time, there's always this tension inside of me of how much space do I give them, and because I don't want to bother them and make them worse, as opposed to I should just do it anyway. Like, do you have any insights about, like, do you wish your mates had contacted you more or less, or like anybody that's wondering about that for someone they know at home? Like, do you have any insights there?
Yeah, I think for me, I certainly needed a lot of time to process, so I needed a fair bit of time alone. But it was just the regular, the once a week, the text message, or the, fortnightly, let's go grab some food. It's just enough to keep me, pull me back into society, so to speak, into the, what the world's happening, like, so that I didn't get too lost inside my own head, but still allowing me that space to process.
Yeah.
Just attached enough, I suppose.
Yeah, just enough. But so obviously that doesn't help anyone.
No, it does.
Try and figure out for each different, because different people are different.
Yeah.
No, I think text is great, isn't it? Because text is unobtrusive, but it's obtrusive at the same time. So to be able to say to somebody, if you've got somebody who you know is experiencing depression, to text them once a week or once a fortnight, it was really helpful for me. And I think that's a really practical thing that anybody can do. So
and it's also
I think it's good.
Send the text, but don't be pushy.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't get a reply that day or the next day, probably don't worry about it. But if it goes 3 or 4 days and you haven't got anything, maybe then you might want to start thinking about following up. But allowing that space, and don't let the no reply get you down, or think that they don't value you as a friend.
That's great.
Because a lot of the time it's just it could be in the moment of processing through something, and they just don't have the energy to reply.
So when you discovered your worth, was it just a moment? Like, was there this aha revelation moment, or was it a gradual coming to realisation that the issue was one of worth and that you were of great worth? Do you know what I'm saying? Was it an event, or was it a process?
It was certainly not an event. It took a lot of time.
Yeah.
So I spent 18 months realising what was wrong.
Yeah.
It took me probably another 18 months to figure out what my worth was.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start taking the little steps back on the right path, it's almost like God puts like extra people around you to help push that one forward.
Yeah.
So I know, like, with Sarah, for instance, my wife, she came along and the way that the relationship with her is different is that she builds me up in who God says I am versus who she needs me to be for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
So I just think she does really amazingly well.
Yeah.
That's powerful. So earlier on you shared a couple of verses that spoke to you and gave you, or that were kind of pivotal moments in you rediscovering your worth and where to get that from. Like, how did you come across those? Like, were you in the habit of reading the Bible, or did you just Google Bible versus worth? Like, what was the story?
I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
I know I certainly have at times Googled, Bible and depression, what does God say about that and things like that. Certainly the Psalms are one that, I just like to turn to every now and then and just read through them because they're so beautiful in what they express. And some of them are just speaking worth into people.
Plus, they give you permission to be real, don't they? Because there's so many times when the Psalms sort of end up in this space and you kind of go, what? And it's just like God's not... he's just kind of saying, it's okay to do that with me. It's okay, you can be angry with me. You can actually leave the sentence in an inappropriate way, and it's so fine. I just want you to be real. So I think the Psalms just give us permission to be authentic and real.
Yeah, most of them are about, they are about thank you, God, for what you're giving me. But a lot of the time they're like a real arm wrestle with God. And why have you done this to me? Yeah. Sort of thing. And it's really, it's helpful to read that. And, these were written thousands of years ago, yet they're going through the same questions, the same struggle, the same wrestle that I've been through.
Yeah, yeah.
That's good.
And again, in Protestant Christianity, and I think Catholicism's a bit this way too, that where you have to be careful with your P's and Q's around this God, and he'll only show up if you tick the right boxes. Well, the Psalms sort of do away with that, don't they? It's kind of like God sort of saying, I just want you to be authentic and real. Just come, just be real, because you're worth, so just come.
The amazing thing about that example you guys have just spoken there is so many of the psalmists, like their whole life was just a tragedy. Do you know what I mean? Like they were messy individuals. Like they were really messed up, some of them.
Yeah. Well, David was a murderer.
Adulterer.
That's most of the Bible characters, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yet they just paint this beautiful illustration about how God still draws near and speaks value and worth into them, isn't it?
Yeah. How he just thinks they're valuable.
Yeah. Let's turn to just slight change of pace. We might just retell a bit of a story about Jesus and about how he chooses to speak identity and value and what he has to say about it, if you guys are all right with that. So the story that we want to talk about today is found in Matthew 20, and it's about the parable of the workers in the vineyard. And so I find it a really interesting one and a really fascinating one because I think this one's a hard one, especially for the Christians. Yeah. Because the story goes like there are these workers that go out into the the courtyard, the hub, whatever. They're looking for a day's worth of work, and then this master comes down and he employs a few of them and says, "Go back to my vineyard, and I'll give you like 1 day's worth of pay." And they go back and start working, and then the master goes back to the courtyard again 3 hours later, and all the people that are still unemployed in there, they don't have anything to do. He hires another group. He goes back another 3 hours later. He hires another group, and this goes on and on through the day until he's had 4 or 5 different rotations of employees. And then it comes to pay time, and the group that was hired last, they come and they get their full day's pay, and the group that was hired first see that and they think, oh, imagine how much we're going to get paid. We're going to get paid so much more now. And then they go to receive their pay and they get the same amount, even though they did it like 10 times the amount of work. And then I might just pick up the last part of this story, and then I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about it. So it says, these men who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you've made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the work in the heat of the day. But he answered one of them, "Friend, I'm not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the man who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money, or are you envious because I am generous? So that the last will be first and the first will be last." It's pretty cool. So the thing that strikes me first and foremost about this is that it's not about communism versus capitalism. It's not about social economic policy or anything like that. But the point of this parable that Jesus shares is actually speaking about people's worth, and he's actually speaking about this concept called grace. And he's talking about the master who's the master in heaven, and how the master, he gets to choose out of his own generosity what to pay people. Sharon, do you want to pick up any thoughts that you have about it? Save me from exhausting our audience with my voice.
Oh, no, except that I probably identify most with the guys who worked all day and expected to get more pay at the end of the day. I must admit, with the JobKeeper, you know, like it's hard, you know, like I look at the hours, for example, that Tim's doing at the moment, and he's receiving the same payment as somebody who's not at work.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like the hours are huge, and there's a part of me that kind of goes, it's not fair.
Yeah.
And so I can identify with their grumble. I can identify with how they're feeling, and you know how cheesed off they are, because I can identify with that. So it is a hard one to understand. And to accept. It's hard because it requires you to give grace as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It requires you to imitate what Christ is wanting us to, and to be gracious, and to let the chips fall where they fall, and to let God be God. And I'm not talking about Scott Morrison, but, you know, to let God be God in the scheme of things, and to kind of go, well, how he chooses to distribute grace is up to him, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. I think the bit that strikes home to me is the bit that, like you, it's kind of like it's so unfair. Like it is so unfair. But taking that illustration of money, or that's their worth, and the reality is that they're all worth the same, or had the same inherent dignity and value as human beings or as workers, and it had nothing to do with what they did.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with their doing, but it had everything to do with their being, and it had everything to do with the generosity of the master. And so our Christian faith sort of talks about how we've been bought at a price, for lack of a better word, that Jesus paid the same price for all of us, regardless of anything that we did, but rather because we've all got the same inherent value in our being.
Yeah.
And so it's a pretty challenging thing, because I think we've all been raised in a way where we measure and compare in a way to see what is fair. And the outrageous thing about this way of the Christian faith is that this thing called grace, and this thing about our value, it's not fair, but it's better than fair. And I think that's the outrageous part about this. And Matt, did anything about that story jump out to you?
Yeah, it's just like, it's so easy to compare it to everyday life.
Yeah.
And, you know, speaking of Christians, for instance, like, you know, a Christian who becomes a Christian early in life versus one that becomes Christian later in life. You know, we're given the ultimate gift of grace, and it doesn't matter how long you've been a Christian for. It's more just taking that step and accepting that grace.
That free gift, just receiving it. Yeah. Absolutely.
I often think of cultures too, where, you know, you have the race thing. You know, in some places in the world, you have whites at the front of a congregation, and coloured people towards the back, and there's just this difference between them. And again, it's that thing where we have these. We grade and compartmentalise and box people, whereas what Jesus is I think what he's trying to say here is there is no distinction. We're all the same, and that grace is just given no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is hard to come to terms with.
So if Jesus were here at the table with us today, and we're having this conversation about JobKeeper and Centrelink, and about where do I find my value and my worth, even though I'm irritable and frustrated or I'm withdrawn or whatever, what do both of you think that Jesus would say?
Oh, I think he'd be killing himself laughing.
Yeah. It's like, they don't get it.
Okay, what would his second statement be then?
He might be saying, welcome to my world.
Yeah.
I'm trying to give gifts as well. I'm trying to give this beautiful gift of grace to everyone. And some people just don't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly I reckon he'd be saying something along the lines of, it doesn't matter what you do, it matters what I've done.
Yeah, wow. That's good. That's very good. So do you think, Matt, if you had this sort of understanding of your grace, the fact that your worth and your value as a being was found in what the Master chose to give to you as opposed to what you could do you think that would have reshaped how you went through those years?
I certainly think it would have done. I reckon if I understood what it was about earlier in life, you know, it would have just been, it was a bad breakup, and then we'd just move on with life, get on with it. But yeah, it certainly could have prevented a bit of a hard time.
But don't you think that the valleys, don't you think that, I just don't know that you can discover your worth without a valley.
That's true. That's the thing. I don't think it ever was possible for me to have figured that out without going through that.
Yeah. And I think that this is why in this season it's such a great invitation for growth, because unless you go through that hard questioning, that hard questioning of the soul, those deep life questions, and ask those things, you don't find the richness to the answer. No. And so I often think that, you know, when pain or when suffering happens, or those big life things, I don't think it's so much about how you avoid them. I think it's okay, what's this grief trying to teach me? What's this pain trying to lead me towards? What's this valley actually about? And asking those deep questions. And that's why I think things like doing Alpha, if you know, it's hard if you're in that depression stage, but you know, going into those kinds of exploratory groups and asking those really deep life meaning questions, I just think it's so rich for your own personal growth. But I don't think that it's possible to actually discover your worth without pain.
No, I think you're right.
That's good. Just as well, there's a world of pain at the moment with this old woo flu. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think that Jesus is a master physician. He says he comes to heal the sick and the broken, and it's the fact that he meets us in the pain, and he just cocoons us in his love, and he just says, come walk with me. Let's walk through this valley together, and let's discover the real truths. Let me share with you from my heart, and I'll give you the wisdom that you need to get out of this. And it's so rich. It's so rich. We should never avoid the valleys.
That's so good. I'm going to ask you guys if you've got any advice for our audience or those people at home in a moment. I'll give you a moment to think about it, and I'll just quickly explain what everyone can do from home. So if today's topic has helped you, or if it's resonated with you, and if you've been questioning some of that value and that self-worth sort of thing, would encourage you to continue to keep watching over the next couple of weeks, because we hope to be able to try to figure it all out together. The other thing that we'd encourage you to do is to try some of these things that these guys have shared from their wisdom and their experience, things like going and spending some time in nature and reflecting and allowing God to meet you in those places, as well as reaching out to some of those people that you think that might be having a little bit of a hard time. And finally, if you do have questions, we'd love to be able to do Alpha with you. Alpha is just an amazing platform for us to be able to ask those questions, because a lot of the times there's not an easy answer. And so a parable like this, like, it's complicated. Like this whole thing of grace and of self-worth coming from not from what we do, but rather than from what he's done. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You guys have both done Alpha before. How did you guys find Alpha?
I enjoy it. I enjoy asking those deep questions. I met with a gentleman my age recently, and he said, Sharon, you're not allowed to talk about politics or religion. I said, well, that's a load of rubbish. I said, everybody talks about politics all the time.
That's pretty much all we talk about.
And I said, we do talk about religion. We just address it up differently.
Yeah.
So, you know, have a proper conversation around it. It's very liberating.
It's more fun talking about that stuff than just talking about people all the time too.
Yeah, and you're actually leading the Alpha this time.
But we might keep that hush-hush because they might not want to do it now. Yeah. Matt, you did it recently too. How did you find it?
I just found it's amazing to do a structured course with other people. You know, there's so many questions that other people ask that I hadn't even considered being a question that was worth asking.
Yeah.
And you just learn so much from everyone else's questions.
It's stimulating, isn't it?
It's really stimulating. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Now, coming back to both of you for that question I posed a minute ago, for people at home, is there anything that you guys would like to say to them?
Just that they're of incredible worth and
Yeah.
they are deeply, deeply loved.
Yep.
And I would probably just add is just keep asking the questions, but don't keep them inside your head. Like, ask them of other people, even though they might not have any answers. When you say your questions out loud, there's something powerful about, getting outside of your own head to hear different thoughts on it.
Yeah.
That's good. Sharon, do you want to pray and then I'll close us out from there?
Sure. Heavenly Father, I just thank you that you love, that you are love, that you love to draw near to us, that we don't have to do anything to earn that love or deserve that love. We just have to receive. That's all you ask us to do, is just to open our heart, hold out our hands and just immerse ourselves in your love. And so I just pray for every person that you'll cocoon them in love, that they'll just be sheltered in your love, that today that they will be so aware of your presence, of your peace, of your joy, of your kindness, of your nearness, and that they are just loved by the God of this universe. Thank you for your love. In your precious name, amen.
Amen. Well, thank you both for joining, and for everyone that's at home, if you do have questions, then please reach out, because we would love to have a conversation and talk about this sort of stuff. But I suppose I'd just like to leave you with that final thought that grace is better than fair. And when we come to understand that, it really does change so much. Thanks, everybody.